What's good? It's Nas Black Seminole Khmetc in the WessCoast Annunaki. My teacher, Khepra Ptah, priest, hymn of the Egyptian order of the White Lotus.
The White Gold Lotus, and teaches at Baba Heri Khafra. So the name is Khepra, Ptah, Menefener, Haru, Atara, Shechem. That's the long way. So I don't expect everybody to remember that. But this is my brother, so we're gonna be building on some stuff today. And what did you want to talk about today, bro?
We're going to talk about, let's talk about the dirty Moors discrediting Africa
Okay.
and their campaign to disconnect. See, right now, if you were an ignorant black person that knew nothing about your ancestors to Africa, and you met one of those Moors first that are screaming out stuff like they're calling Pan-African slaves, saying stuff like "fuck Africa," but the same dude say you'll vote for Trump twice if he's saying "fuck Africa."
Okay. Well, here's the thing. There's been this movement for a long time amongst us. Two things are happening, right? There are those of us who have indigenous ancestors from here, right? And there's also those of us who figured that, hey, we've been here for so many generations, so we feel at a connection with the land. So I have a neutral position on that, but I think the disrespect needs to also be checked. Because first of all, to say that the slave trade never happened, that's not true. It did happen. All those 40 slave castles on the coast of West Africa, those are not make-believe. Those exist, and there's historians in Africa that talk about the slave trade. So that did happen. The transatlantic slave trade is real. So to say it didn't happen is kind of like, taking a stretch, and basically looking through history and literally flipping through pages and not reading them.
Ashe. People saying stuff like they can't find the ships. That's not proof because you can't find a 300-year-old ship. You said one of them was dismantled. That was at the museum on purpose.
Yeah, there was one in Virginia. I had a sister tell me that they had a slave ship in the museum in Virginia, and they literally got rid of it. So you can expect them to get rid of the evidence.
Exactly.
Because first of all, they don't want you having a connection to Africa because they're trying to steal all the resources out of Africa. They don't want you having that connection, you see. And I'm gonna just keep it real. I've looked at some of the pictures that my brothers and sisters here have posted saying that they're indigenous. And I've seen earlier pictures of those that were red Indians, and I see where they've superimposed black faces and black features on those red Indians. I've also seen where they've taken pictures of Africans and acted as though those were indigenous American tribes. When before those very same pictures were pictures of brothers and sisters that came directly off the continent. You can tell the difference between an indigenous person from over here and a brother or a sister with West African features. And some of you brothers and sisters look directly like you're right out of West Africa, and you'll go right to West Africa and blend in, and they would think you were their people. So stop, because a lot of times you do be their people. A lot of you sisters and brothers are descendants of Congo, descendants of Ghana, descendants of Yoruba, descendants of Igbo, and this is true. This is facts. So there was a slave trade, and there were slave ships. And keep in mind, the slave ships were cargo ships. So after the slave trade, they got reconverted back into other forms of cargo. They didn't get rid of the ships necessarily. They just repurposed them.
So you guys got to ask yourself, what's the real agenda behind these? Also, they don't call themselves Moors anymore. They dropped the B-E-Y from their name. They add a whole bunch of X's and Y's like there's some kind of undercover. And I know they are 100%. I was going on head up 1 on 5, like me against 5 of them on Snitchagram. And we had thousands of words, back and forth in the dialogue. And every single time I said, you guys are just undercover Moors, you dropped the B-E-Y, and that X and Y, they never responded at once. And somebody went back on Snitchagram and erased every single word of all those conversations of me saying that. So they just confirmed it by not replying to it and then trying to hide the evidence again.
There's a concerted effort to stop us from wanting to identify with our African origin. There's an African connection. I've heard people talk about the Pangea and so forth. But you see, when the Pangea was together, there weren't humans of that magnitude walking around like that. You see what I mean? So the science, because people get the idea of the Pangea, they get it from the very scientists that talk about evolution. So it's not a new discovery. You know what I mean? The Pangea, according to science, is over millions of years old. That was millions of years ago. So yeah, it's true. You can see where the continents hooked up into one another. But if you was to bring all those continents together, right in the center of those continents would be the Great Pyramid of Kemet over there in Giza, the Giza Plateau. So the thing about it is that when we deny that there was anything African, I think we're cheating ourselves. And the reason why this is so important to me is being a priest of African tradition is that you have to tap and call upon your ancestors. When you act like you don't have any connection with those ancestors, you're literally cutting off an ancestral lineage, which is the key to your spiritual power. Because remember, your DNA is voice activated and it's within you. You're calling on the names of your grandma and grandpa, and you may not remember everything consciously, but it's in your subconscious, and your ancestors will rebel against you if you ignore them and fight against them. So you cannot ignore that part of your ancestry.
I just realized in the last couple of seconds, the Moors got a triple pronged attack. So it's to disconnect the Black Americans, I don't even want to call them, but the Black people in America from Africa. To also, saying we're the real Indians. The Caucasus Indians are fake Indians. I'm a Black Seminole. I'm a Black Indian. I go to TP Prayer Meeting, Sweat Lodge, got peyote in my room. I got peoples that's medicine men that run lodges like car carrying red medicine men, and we don't like, it's not even nothing like that. It doesn't even matter what race you are once you go into TP, but we got all the Moor led, undercover Moor led Black indigenous movement who, and also they're selling them packets for $1,500 in sovereign packets, and they know those packets don't work. So they claim they're for the people, but they're taking advantage of people. Now, I've never heard of a single person that's been able to show up with the. I'm not knocking it. I hope it does work. I understand what they're trying to do, but I never heard of a single person who even knows somebody that showed up with that sovereign paperwork and were able to reclaim land with that $1,500 packet that you just wasted $1,500 on, and they know that the parasites are not going to enforce it because they don't follow their own laws. Why would they follow the laws of sovereignty? Mm-hmm. We're up here in Seattle. I heard some Moors went up to somewhere in Bellevue and they showed up with their paperwork to reclaim some land and showed up at a mansion and got charged with residential burglary. Like,
yeah.
I think they would, of course.
I mean, first of all, even if, I had a brother tell me something. He was telling me that some years ago, there was a brother that he knew was a Moorish science. He was into Moorish science and everything else. And he got to the point that he was able to go back and forth with the prosecutor, with the attorney, and everything else. The judge literally shut down the court and called him in the back room and said, everything you said is true, according to the law, his knowledge of the law at that time, because the dude was pretty filthy in the law. The judge said, however, you know what I have that you don't have?
Eminent domain or something?
He said he has an army, he got a military, and everything else to back him up.
That's what the judge said.
You see what I mean? So the thing about it is that, right. Paperwork, wow. Look at what they're doing to the Constitution. That's a document. Is anybody honoring that? Do you think you have freedom of speech? You can't even say too much on YouTube without getting shut down. So you got to be careful of what you say. That doesn't sound like freedom of speech to me. So that document is not even being honored. So what makes you think that some paperwork that you're signing is going to, hold up to their ability to honor you? They don't honor the paperwork that they have you doing now. They can actually have you fill out an application and work a job and fire you for no reason.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Okay. So, look at what they did to the Native Americans with treaties. They lied to them. They didn't even know what they were signing half the time and signing their rights away. And it didn't give them the right to do that. But here's the thing. When you sign something, there's an occult principle behind it that you want to be careful of. When you put something on paper, what you're doing is you're bringing it down from the spiritual realm to the physical realm. And that becomes a curse, you see, for those who don't understand of what they're breaking, what they're going up against. But you're dealing with an occult group. You're dealing with people who are into the occult. They know how to do certain things that you may not know how to do if you're not into it yourself, or how deep a level these people who run the system are initiates of. So it just needs to be known that you're not dealing with people who are just average when it comes to their strategy of keeping you in line. So when you're looking at the symbols of the black and white, checkers and everything else that's dealing with duality. And whenever you are caught up in the game, that means that you're participating in duality. And as long as you participate in duality, they can always play games with you.
Oh, shit.
Checkers and chess. Notice, checkers and chess, they both had red and black or white and black checkers. Okay? And you have to strategize on what kind of move that you want to make. Such a game is not possible without duality. And this is why they always keep you dwelling in duality. That's why they have you choose between Democrat and Republic. You see what I mean? Republican. But either or the two wings of the same system. The options that they give you are always connected at the top. So when you're dealing with these folks who are telling you to pick and choose whether you're African or Native, you may actually have all forms of different bloodlines in you. You know what I mean? And some of you brothers go and get blood tested and say that I can't find any Native American blood. Instead, you find white blood. Hey, it is what it is. A lot of these brothers who think that they're Native Americans are descendants of those who were enslaved by that particular group who were down with the civilized tribe who embraced Christianity and got rid of their culture.
Sure.
Okay? Sure. Not to say that there wasn't Native brothers and sisters who wasn't fighting for their rights. Unfortunately, there's always traitors in every group, you see? And that's why I tell black people, stop acting like it's such a shame that there's traitors in your race. Every group has traitors. Every group has a traitor in it, okay? It's just that you have to understand who you are and live up to your principles and don't betray your own principles.
It just look like we got more traitors than most. I mean,
yeah.
Just how it looked. I want to go back to my thought. I didn't finish it. Right. So part of the Undercover Moors three-pronged attack, the disconnect black people in America from Africa, disconnect the black indigenous from the native indigenous, the native indigenous from here, and to have a problem in between there. So part of my problem with the third thing was to disconnect us from Egypt and say that Egypt was 100% in the Grand Canyon.
That's bullshit too. Show me an Egyptian word that says that the Grand Canyon says Khmetc, and I'll rest my case. If you can, even though they find that, every time I see a documentary about Egypt being in the Grand Canyon, they show me a bunch of stuff with Buddhist statues and some mummies on one side and Buddhist statues on the other side. So as far as we're concerned, that could have been a bunch of people who got on a boat and came over here. I mean, shit. There's the Perry-Reese map that goes back to the Ptolemaic period. The Perry-Reese map comes out of Alexandria, Egypt. And guess what? It's a map of the whole world, of the continents not being connected. Which means that they got on a boat and they were able to go around the continent, around the whole planet that you think is flat. And they basically saw that there were other lands and other continents, and they knew about currents that took you all the way from Africa, all the way over here to North America. They knew about currents and how to basically navigate those currents. So when they tell you that, that this is 100% Egypt and everything about what they say about Egypt and Africa is a lie, show one place where they show Khmetc in the Nahuatl Aztec Mayan language. Show where they show Tameri in the Nahuatl Aztec and Mayan language. Show this. Otherwise, you ain't got no receipts and you're just simply regurgitating some shit that you heard somebody else say. Now, I will say that there's similarities between the Teotihuacan and what's in Khmetc, the way they got the pyramids lined up and everything else, and the fact that we're dealing with some advanced architecture. But when they say stuff like the pyramids over here are older than the pyramids in Egypt, prove that, because you can't date rock. You can't carbon date rock. Okay? So cut the crap. So, and there's also evidence that the Mayans and Khmeticians were visiting each other. You see that there's mummies among the Native Americans that you find down there in South America and all the way into Mexico. They show them in like mummies sitting up with their arms and with their arms crossed like this. Sometimes they even have a crook in the flail like the pharaohs, their own version of it. They even got their own version of the Sim priest, and the Sim priest would have the jaguar skin. Would have the leopard skin. Their version of the Sim priest have the jaguar skin, and they got the same instruments that they show where they'll put it up to the lips of the mummy to get them to be able to speak in the afterlife. They got those same things, which shows that they had the same spiritual technology because they were probably interconnecting and they were probably influencing one another and they were trading ideas. So they found South American cocoa leaves, and remnants of it in the belly of Ramses. So I mean, you know, yes, they were kicking it. They had boats, but because you're dealing with racist history, does not tell you everything, right? And they want to disconnect you from over here, and you're fully embracing it by disconnecting yourself instead of doing what the ancestors did and have what is called Smai Tawi, which is unification of the two lands. You want to separate yourself and become weak. That's why what's going on with you. Divide and conquer. You keep falling for it. And you let those agents who's been paid to tell you bullshit continue to do that same thing to you over and over again. You keep falling for it. And that's why there's no unity. They got us divided up. When they got they got us playing on the red and white checkered square floor with the males and females. They got males and females not getting along. You know, you go to school, she goes to business school, and they tell her that hey, now it's your turn to overcome the patriarchy. And guess what? She believes that she's overcoming the patriarchy, and she's being taught subtly not to listen to anything that you're saying. Okay? So I'm not saying that she's your enemy. I'm saying that they're playing you against each other. And then now they tell you some stuff in school. And they did the same thing to us in the 60s. What they were encouraging the brothers to do was to be pimps. And then telling the women that they didn't need a man and that they can rely on the state. And they had a whole bunch of books on how to be a player, how to be a pimp and a Mac. You know, that came out, you know, to occupy the men and the women. They were basically given all these benefits and everything else, saying that they didn't need us and they could just rely on the state. You got to kick your man out the house. You see what I mean? You can be a single mama. And they pushed that narrative. They pushed that shit among black families. So they disconnected you from your family. They disconnected you from your history. They've broken up your community. And this is where you're at now.
So in closings, I gotta hop back on this West Coast I-5 death trap gridlock traffic. Get back down the freeway. Stay alert and cognizant, brothers and sisters. And I'm not talking to most of y'all because most of y'all ain't brothers and sisters. But I'm just the ones that with the Inye Udili food, which means righteousness in Swahili, the divine light. Stay cognizant of those three traps to divide us even more than already divided, got up by the FBI agent controlling dirty Moors who put out these ideas and told them to flip their name and try to go undercover. The three to keep the black people in America separated from Africa and specifically also Egypt and Africa, and to divide the black natives from the other natives and the other black natives, because part of argument with a lot of them was like, you guys are whining and complaining about and all this other stuff. You stole this is our stuff, but you don't. That's it. That's all your culture is whining and complaining. I don't see you guys doing any like ceremonies or anything like that. So instead of like joining an actual ceremony where no one would be 90% chance, 95% chance, nobody's going to be racist to them in the ceremony anyway. They're just going to complain and try to stay separate. So it's all separation and divide and conquer. And I'm going to get off now.
All right, brother Black Seminole.
Stay oxen.
Peace and power. Stay oxen.